Motivation is considered as one of the most impactful factors that drive student achievement. This is why we, as pre-service teachers, decided to conduct action research to study and provide findings on whether and how certain educational practices such as inquiry-based learning, effective feedback, quality homework, and reflective learning can promote student intrinsic motivation for learning.
Contemporary sociopolitical circumstances progressively require its constituents to exhibit entrepreneurship and independent management. For example, during the pandemic era, novel industries surrounding freelance entertainment or online logistics dominated the market. Hence, educators have a responsibility to prepare their students for these societal demands.
Among major factors influencing acquisition of knowledge, student motivation and its surrounding context are primary sources behind academic achievements. These outcomes also follow the principles of Bloom's taxonomy for effective learning. They encourage higher order thinking, which are considered catalysts that impact student motivation within education environments. Intrinsic motivation is the drive within individuals to pursue improvement and excellence for personal satisfaction. With the development of self-efficacy, students are able to maintain longitudinal working routines and independently research relevant topics. Academic achievements are then tied with a feeling of ownership and mastery. Utilizing the self-determination theory, our group borrowed 3 core principles to measure teaching actions' influence on motivation: student autonomy, personal relevance, and guided competence. These factors correspond with exploratory learning processes and authentic approaches that facilitate reflective classroom practices. Utilizing metacognitive strategies and maintaining high expectations of students' decision-making skills is congruent to promoting motivation. These problem-solving tendencies would aid the development of fluid intelligence, which is a form of equitable education for those without a high socioeconomic status background.
While motivation is considered an internal process, studies show that motives are also driven by external factors. The value of the extrinsic aspects of life is especially pronounced when the transition into the high school environment occurs, thereby social involvement and extracurricular activities overweighs motivation for academic performance. Nevertheless, extrinsic motivation provides temporary and insidious incentives for students to fulfill their roles. In avoidance of adverse consequences, they may perfunctorily complete schoolwork. Consequently, the most efficient methods of achieving higher educational outcomes are linked to increasing students' intrinsic motivations, yet without overlooking the power of extrinsic stimulators.
Principles of social constructivism theory and the humanistic perspectives of individual growth recommend formative assessments based on highlighting the areas of success. This is complemented by instructions for improvement, which promotes intrinsic motivation. Conversely, students' lack of motivation in learning manifests in homework, classroom participation, and performance. Our group decided to draw upon the intricacies of homework assignments and its implications.
Effective homework is purposeful, specific, and reinforces learning. If homework is less meaningful, it will unlikely motivate students' learning. There are 4 types of homework purpose: preparation, extension, and practice. If none of them applies, the teacher needs to rethink the necessity of assigning homework. When students clearly know the purpose of the assignment, their negative feelings about completing the assignment are reduced because they have a direction and a goal to achieve. Our group recognized that every student is unique, and the teachers need to differentiate the instructions to accommodate the learning method and abilities to individuals. Appropriate allocation of homework serves as a tool for guided mastery, allow students to build confidence gradually as they perform with the support of scaffolds. Continued success, as discussed earlier, brings about sustenance of motivation. Hence, it is an essential quality of teaching actions.
With regard to students, very little, if any, learning can occur unless students are motivated on a consistent basis. Albrecht asserts that self-efficacy will be strengthened if students are not only informed about their success and failures, but also instructed on the ways of going forward to achieve improved outcomes. Comprehending teaching actions and learning content that propel motivation growth will guide the course of our research inquiry.
Our data collection methodology includes collecting artifacts such as student works to identify evidence of learning progression while inquiry-based learning was implemented, class observation notes such as assessment of submitted student works to evaluate how positively constructed feedback motivates students for improvement, student surveys to explore their perceptions of feedback versus motivation, interviews with parents to complement our data with parents' observations after our pilot study, and finally, interviews with students to allow them to share their views on motivational homework as well as whether motivation can be stimulated through reflective learning. Collected evidence involves a mix of qualitative and quantitative data.
In the following section, we will discuss our data analysis and findings. As previously mentioned, the objective of our research is to find tangible connections between various educational factors and student motivation. One of these connections lies in the significance of social context and experience. According to self-determination theory, students intrinsically develop motivation and self-efficacy for pursuing knowledge when they find personal relevance within the learning content. This is evidenced in our findings concerning inquiry-based learning experiences, whereby students incorporated elements of their life into the assignments. Observations from student work artifacts showed high levels of personalization of the research topic. There are elements of niche hobbies, seemingly mundane events, and diverse subject areas covered in the animation storyboards. Of the 2 stages of the student research presented in the artifacts, at least 3 out of 5 students showed both literacy and animation achievements in their projects. All of the participating students highlighted high levels of personal relevance. When direct instruction is minimized and exploratory scaffolds are utilized, the majority of students show tendencies for independent research and experimentations. These are considered positive signs of motivation for creative arts and other project-based subjects. It also fulfills the expectations of the critical and creative thinking framework recommended within the Australian curriculum.
Similarly, student autonomy is another principle from the self-determination theory that positively correlates with motivation for academic achievement. This is supported by results from student interviews regarding reflective learning experiences. 6 out of 8 interviewees claimed they lacked choices during class and subsequently responded with responsive towards learning. On the other hand, the remaining 2 students responded favorably towards progressive learning. It appears that when direct instruction absolves responsibility for learning from the students, self-efficacy is negatively impacted. As such, it is essential to allow students to challenge themselves through a high level of learning autonomy, developing the habits of pursuing academic achievements independently or through guided mastery.
Further research specifically into the teaching action of assigning homework provides insights of pedagogical approaches that are tied to students' motivation. All interviewed subjects have homework assigned by their teachers. 2 students spend 2 to 3 hours to do their homework per day. 4 students spend 1 to 2 hours, and 2 students spend around 30 minutes per day on homework. Most of them do not do any schoolwork on the weekend unless there is an assessment due or a test coming. A favorable consensus with 7 out of 8 students showing a positive attitude of the noted number of assignments. They reflected that homework services as useful scaffolds for overall improvement to their learning. This is a form of guided competence that allows students to internalize the classroom instruction and learning content.
However, one of the students remarked about redundancy in homework covering classroom materials. This has discouraged the students from finding relevance and motivation for completing the assignments. Upon further examination, it appears that the form of assignments heavily impacts the students' attitude towards them. For example, 6 out of 8 students like creative and flexible options and responding solutions. This once again can be synthesized to our other findings that suggest student autonomy is a high performer in increasing student motivation. We can also conclude that maintaining student motivation is a reciprocal formula based around receptive understanding of how stakeholders respond to learning stimuli.
While the quality of homework or classwork tasks is essential in stimulating student interest in completing the work, providing regular feedback on that work is an important strategy to promote and maintain student motivation. However, it is the nature of feedback that determines the effect of feedback. Our findings allow to conclude that When feedback is constructed positively, when it highlights strengths and instructs for improvement, increasing motivation for submitting homework and improving its quality is more pronounced with typical students, average achievers, while the high achievers' performance remains the same, and low achievers demonstrate occasional improvement in their motivation for homework. However, the students' perceptions of how feedback affects their motivation have significantly changed after the implementation of a pilot intervention for 14 weeks. All the students acknowledge that regularly provided positive feedback stimulates better motivation. However, most of the students are unsure whether generalized feedback means anything to them.
Parallelly, interviews with parents unfolded the specific aspects of increased motivation observed by the parents during and after the implementation of the pilot study, such as increased enthusiasm towards learning and improvement, 85%, while the least mentioned observation was that the tasks had become easier to complete, around 25%. 35% of the parents thought that the positive feedback strategy helped to strengthen their child's connection with school. Then the same number of parents noticed increased interest towards the subject taught. More than half of the parents observed increased commitment towards learning, as well as improved learning and performance skills. Most interestingly, the vast majority of parents, around 75%, believe that due to the positive feedback strategy, their children have become more independent and self-regulated learners. Parents were also referring to other factors that might have had an impact on their children's increased motivation after the pilot study. The mentioned factors included the quality of tasks and learning materials, friendships, prior knowledge and learning capabilities, family, cultural values and experiences, and relationship with the teacher. These factors have consistently been discussed within our general research topic, which raises a new inquiry question. What are the factors that affect student motivation for learning the most?
Indeed, fostering student motivation occurs through balanced maintenance of academic rigor, empathy, and shared construction of knowledge. Creative and critical thinking apply to all educational stakeholders in fulfilling those conditions. As such, a longitudinal study for comprehensive comparison is required to continuously improve students' motivation.
In conclusion, our group recommends the following interventions and strategies that promote motivation for learning. Building a positive teacher-student relationship. Martin and Coley state that positive relationships with teachers are considerably related to positive motivation and to better academic achievement. Their study found that students are more likely to engage in class and cooperate with the teacher when the teacher shows concern and attention to their ideas.
Developing a sense of belongings in school. Students are most motivated to learn when they believe that they are accepted by their school environment. Teachers are authority figures, can set the tone for class relationships and make the students feel they are valued members of the group. They may also attach great importance to the student's social and cultural identity, which can produce a sense of common purpose and activities that can motivate students and enhance their sense of belonging.
Enhance assignment interest and engagement. In classes, positive attitudes and emotions, as well as personalized high levels of interest in tasks, promote greater intrinsic motivation and perceptions of competence. When engaged in activities and tasks related to their interests, students found that learning is easier, more enjoyable, and more relevant.
Emphasize the relevance and the importance of learning. Bedford points out that students' motivation of learning increases when teachers increase the challenges, providing personalized topics which involve the students' life experience, and giving students the opportunities to find examples of specific academic concepts being used in the community to explore the relevance and the importance of their current learning.
Develop students' self-efficacy. Motivation is heavily influenced by students' expectations of success or failure, which in turn are influenced by teachers' expectations. When there is an imbalance between challenge and skill, learning activities are not rewarding. The highest level of motivation occurs when there is a combination of high challenge and high self-efficacy. Some practices include providing regular positive feedback to students to help them master the contents, developing scaffolds, help students set practical goals, focus on personal efforts and improvements rather than only on grades.
The interpretation of the results of this study is limited because this action research was completed during the lockdown. The participants were restricted to the numbers, also were not in specific school, class, or faculty. The group members hope the next research project direction will include the analyzed data and conclusion, adjust the theory, and begin the research within a longer period of time for a larger amount of same grade high school students. Eventually, promote the findings to be completely generalizable to the broader community based on the new study.
While it is notable the participant pool is limited in quantity, research findings are collected from a diverse range of students with varied cultural backgrounds, academic stages, and strength. In accordance to continuous improvement cycle of education research projects, we would recommend continuing further similar researches to broaden the breadth of responses from all stakeholders. This should further clarify specific teaching actions, learning environment changes, and curriculum design's impact on students' motivation.